Hello, my name is Luis Duarte and you are at Brazilian Council. Here we talk about international relations and language learning. In today's video, we're gonna analyze the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump in his Liberation Day and the impacts on that on the global trade and other consequences beyond that as well. For that, I'm going to take the analysis of Professor Sarah Payne. She is a professor at the US Naval War College, and she recently carried out an interview and a lecture in which she described the similarities of this moment we are living with the 1930s. This comparison has also been taken part by many other analysts, but I will take a few other things that Sarah Payne brings, so that's why I'm following her analysis. Right. Um, First thing we gotta have in mind is the similarities, right? Um, in 1930s, the United States increased tariffs against the world. First, we had the Fortney-McCumber Act of 1992 that raised the import tax on foreign goods to about 40%. And then in June 1930, with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, the US added about 20% to the already high import duties on foreign agricultural products and manufactured goods. This had terrible impacts in the global trade, right? And the consequences, the most remarkable consequence that is the tariff was implemented in 1930, 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, right? What happened? Japan was a trade nation that relied on trade, depend on that. And when the US imposed high tariffs and the other countries decide to retaliate, follow suit, what happens? The global trade shrunk. Right? WTO, the World Trade Organization, has already highlighted the consequences of this increase on tariffs at this current moment. They also make some comparisons with the period 100 years ago. And when we take a look at Japan saw that they couldn't rely on trade. Right? Trade was not as available as it was before. And for that, I'd like to quote also Clausewitz. He wrote the book on war. He was a military fighting against Napoleon, and he said, "War is merely the continuation of policy by other means. We see, therefore, that war is not merely an act of policy, but a true political instrument." So, when we take this in perspective, what we see Japan couldn't trade, right? So what they're gonna do? They're gonna take. Right? There is another quote for unknown author that says that the soldier and the businessman, they are in the opposite sides of history most of the time, right? Because the businessman is gonna trade. It's gonna bring something and trade for something else that he or she wants. When we take the soldier into perspective, we see that the soldier doesn't trade, he takes what he wants. And this is exactly what happened with Japan. Japan realized they couldn't rely on trade, so they decided that they need an empire, a large one, capable of promoting their growth, right? Promoting Japan to be the superpower they wanted. And when we analyze the Second World War, the start is 1939 and it goes until 1945. This is the understanding mostly when we take the under perspective the European scenario. But when we analyze the Asian theater, what we see that the war started in 1931, right after the raise of the tariffs, right? Japan invaded Manchuria, then it started expanding, and the U.S. started retaliating and sanctions, trying to tell Japan to go back. But Japan had in its mind that they couldn't go back because there was no trade. So this ended up on the Japanese attack of Pearl Harbor, which brought the US to the war in 1941 and also to the war in Europe and finishing in 1945 with the atomic bombs and everything else. So when we analyze this, the point is the high tariffs, they push the countries away, right? Sarah Payne calls the attention for the fact that before those high tariffs, Japan, Germany, and Italy cooperated in the international order. After the First World War, uh, due to the claim of Woodrow Wilson, US president, it was created the League of Nations. And Japan, Germany, and Italy were members of the organization. Japan and Germany up to 1933, and Italy up to 1937. And Sarah Payne also calls the attention for the fact that when there is a scenario that causes desperation in the United States, the desperate outside the US is much higher. So this is what happens. When the US is facing the Great Depression in 1929, the New York crash of the stock market, the other countries go in a much deeper desperation, which gives room to Hitler to raise to power in Germany, Mussolini to get to power in Italy, and Tojo to take over the control of the Japanese government into a way more militarized posture and approach to how Japan should deal in the international order. Those countries were cooperating with the international order. U.S. was not a member of the League of Nations. Sarah Payne criticizes this, which is a critic shared by many analysts, that the League of Nations failed because there was no country, the US, better say, was not there capable of enforcing the rules, the decisions of the organization. Therefore, when they decide to create the United Nations after the Second World War, United States is present and is an active member working to enforce the order. Due to the recent situations and actions from the international community, the Prime Minister of Singapore, Lawrence C. Wong, made an announcement speaking to the Singaporean people and also to the world, saying that the WTO, World Trade Organization, which everybody was used to and which was really important to the survival and existence of small countries, was now in check, right? People didn't know what was going to happen about that. And he says that the WTO is an organization that helps to promote this cooperation. The United States has been a long member of it, an important key member for the cooperation to keep going. When I was in my international relations course, one of my professors raised the question that will China and India, as they grow and become more powerful, will they accept the institutions created after Second World War and recognize their credibility? So the question at the time was about these new powers, but we were not thinking that the United States could undermine its own institutions, right? The institutions that the United States has created by himself. And what we see nowadays is the United States is putting the WTO, United Nations, in check, which are long-lasting organizations, permanent organizations for dialogue between the countries. And I'd like to mention here a few statistics regarding the operational of the World Trade Organization. When we come to those countries, any country can come up with the disputes, right? Raise a dispute against another partner. And when we come to that, what we see is That, for instance, here, Brazil. We have the countries as complainant, as respondent, as a third party, right? So Brazil has 34 participations in the organization as complainant, 17 as respondent, and 174 as third party. China has 30 as complainant, 53 as respondent. So countries complaining about the approach of China to the world trade, seeking for a fairer deal with China, and 198 as third party. European Union has 114 complainants, 97 respondents, 219 as third party, and the US has 124 as complainants. So US really coming on asking for fair trade, but it's also been pushed by the other countries with 164 as respondent of complaints and 180 participations as third party. What is this third party? This is key to show how important is this organization, right? So I'm taking here a paper uh, from the University of Oxford, Korean University, and McGill University that says the third part participation at the WTO. What have we learned? So I get to the abstract. This is from 2017. Uh, so I will read quickly here the abstract of this article. The issue of participation has always loomed large in the World Trade Organization. The question is, who is allowed in the room? When it comes to dispute settlement, the issue largely falls under a single mechanism. The one means by which countries other than the litigants can enter the room during the WTO disputes is by joining as third parties. So third parties are for those who are not the litigants parties in the dispute, but they go there. Third party status allows members to become privy to otherwise private consultations, as well as to voice their views to the panel and AB during litigation and have them recorded in the final ruling. Third party status has only gained in importance through time, as the institution has encouraged participation and gradually expanded third party rights. So this is very important because it's this instrument that makes the countries eager, keen to participate, to dialogue, to use diplomacy, to use the politics instead of the battle to solve their issues, right? Right now, with the tariffs of Donald Trump, China has put a complaint against the US, saying that it's going against previous treaties and against the trade order. So, what we have, if the WTO can't deal with the situation, the countries decided to not recognize, not to credit the organization its power. Well, what happens? We are falling to bilateral dialogues, and if bilateral dialogues don't go further, we can end up in war, which was the case of the Second World War. Japan couldn't rely on bilateral dialogues, so they went after Manchuria, right? We also saw this with Germany, and it ended up in that horrendous war, right? So the idea here is what can be the outcome, right? Lawrence Wong, the Prime Minister of Singapore, also reminded the fact that the absence or the inability of the or WTO and other organizations to play their role can also can also uh, put in a very difficult spot for small nations who cannot face bigger ones. So the situation for the countries in the South China Sea, small countries of Central America such as Panama, that the U.S. is now pressuring because they want to get control of the canal. But Panama is cooperating. We don't listen about countries who can't pass through the canal. Uh, you just pay the fee that is agreed as fair by everybody, and they can navigate through on in and out, right? So this situation, when the countries don't recognize the credibility of these organizations, small countries have very little to do, very few options to choose from in order to work for their survival. The situation calls our attention to 1930, and we shall wait and see what will be the decisions of the countries in the following weeks, the following months. I don't believe that the action of the United States at this point in time is going to be the new modus operandi for the country for the forthcoming years and decades, but it certainly is the way of dealing with the international order of this current American administration. So, shall we wait and see? And in the upcoming videos, I will bring more news.